Welcome to the show. This is my first live broadcast of the year. We haven't done one since maybe halfway or towards the end of the 2024 season. And I'm doing this because I am going to give all of my 2025 college football playoff predictions. I'm going to give them live. This video will then be saved, edited, and I will combine it with my annual draft I do with a couple friends. You'll see as we pick teams to make the college football playoff, you'll see how many of my picks predictions I end up being able to pick. So I'll append that to the back of this video. So if you're watching live, you're not going to see that. But if you're watching this recorded, you will see my picks followed by a draft with two friends where we're going to battle through two podcasters, I should say, friends and podcasters. And you'll see how it all goes down. So we'll get some differing opinions. So before I dive into these picks, I'm going to hit our intro music for just a couple seconds. That's where I'll cut it when this is not live, and then we'll be into predictions. So here we go. All right. Well, here they are, my 12 teams that I have making the college football playoff. You could take a look there. But I'm going to run down. I'm going to start with number one, and I'm going to talk through the teams that I have making a bye, or a top four seed and earning a bye, I should say. So number one, the Penn State Nittany Lions. That's perhaps a little bit bold. It really shouldn't be when you consider they were in the Final Four last year, and they bring seemingly everyone back. Yes, they lose Abdul Carter. That's a defensive end, led the nation in tackles for loss, and that is a big loss. And I expect their defense to take a slight step back as a result. They also lose Tom Allen, who leaves to go to Clemson to become the Clemson defensive coordinator. That's a big loss. But they go out and get maybe the only guy I would say is as good or better. They swipe their arch rival, the Ohio State Buckeyes defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles. Not only does that maybe give them some sort of an edge going against the Buckeyes, but they avoid a possible drop-off, losing their defensive coordinator. So I think that is huge. And I think that really helps, at least for me, absolve the concerns I would have about the defense. The offense, though, they've got a veteran offensive line coming back. They've got two 1,000-yard rushers coming back, and Singleton and Allen. And Drew Aller, I know he hasn't come through in some of the biggest games, but they've got a quality quarterback, a veteran. Is this the year he comes through in a big game? We'll talk about that as we go through and pick winners. But I think that's even though it's not a common pick, I think it's a common sense pick. Penn State deserves to be number one in my book. Down at the bottom, you see Texas is number two. The SEC is really deep this year. There's so many teams I could have put in the playoff from the SEC, and I'm sure they'll get 4 or maybe even 5 teams. But picking out which ones was tough because, there's not a 2022 Georgia. There's not a 2022 Alabama. There's certainly not a 2019 LSU, at least not as we can tell right now. And so it's tough in the SEC, but of the upper half or so, I think Texas is probably the cream of the crop. They do lose a real lot on offense, and that offense the offense wasn't great last year. They might continue to be fine, but that defense should be really, really good, and that's something you can bank on. If they've got a good defense, a good running game, and they're well coached, I think that's a pretty good recipe, especially given the success they've already had under Steve Sarkisian. They've got a lot of talent, and now the program has the stability and the culture. I think they're an easy team to pencil into the playoff, and I've penciled them in at number 2. Before I talk Clemson, hey, thanks again for joining the live stream if you're watching this live, and thanks for everyone who's watching the recorded version. I will circle back after each round or maybe at the end and hit some of these questions and comments. So leave your questions. I'm monitoring them, so definitely leave questions and comments in the live stream. All right, Clemson Tigers. I have them at number 3. And remember, they've moved away from the top 4 conference champions getting an automatic bye and an automatic top 4 seed. So when I say Clemson's 3, I mean Clemson earned a top 3 seed by merit, not by going 9-3, but still somehow winning the conference. No, that's not what I mean. I mean Clemson earned a top 3 seed. Clemson is also the ACC champion with this pick. This is basically saying and I have a separate video on this. If you haven't already, go watch my regular season predictions for the Clemson Tigers. That's also posted. I'll make sure that links here at the end of this video. But I have Clemson going 11-1, then going to Charlotte and winning there, where Clemson pretty much never loses in Charlotte. So Clemson, number 3. I'll talk plenty about Clemson, so I'll move on for now. And then Georgia, like Texas, I'm not necessarily blown away by Georgia this year. I think, they don't have a top flight quarterback. I don't know that their offensive line is what it was a couple of years ago. I think losing Matt Luke is starting to hurt them now. And losing Monken at offensive coordinator, the OC who coordinated their last national championship. I think they miss him as well. The defense will be salty, and they'll have a lot of talent. I can't imagine Georgia missing the playoff. And I'm going to give them the 4. Although if we scoot back a little bit and look at that 5-12, Notre Dame, Georgia could be a little bit controversial and interesting. You could flip them. I'm sort of just 4 and 5 is kind of a toss-up to me. And that's because, do you want Notre Dame, Boise State again? They play in the regular season. I think Boise State's the best team out of the group of 5. They've won 15 of their last 18 games since they got their current coach. So they've won 15 of 18. All 3 of those losses are to Power 4 opponents. And those are all 3 games they played against Power 4 opponents. So they're 0-3 in their last 3 against Power 4 opponents. They're 15-0 against Mountain West and other a group of 5 teams or FCS teams. So I think it's pretty easy to see them losing to Notre Dame in the regular season, running the table, getting back in the playoff. Now imagine, what if Georgia is the 3 or the 2 heading into conference championship weekend? They lose to Texas. Do you drop them out of the bye because Notre Dame rested while Georgia had to play an elite top 4 team? That feels wrong, but they wouldn't really love a Notre Dame Boise State rematch, so maybe they would. So that's just an interesting little side note there. And then so Notre Dame, Boise State, I know Ashton Jeanty is gone, and so a lot of people might be down on Boise State for that reason, but you got to consider they return a lot of production, much more than a lot of these other group of 5 teams. Maddox Madsen is back at quarterback. They got 4 starters at offensive line back. I think Boise State's a good team. Shouldn't overlook them just because their star running back's gone. If you have to pick one G5 team, and you do, I think Boise State is the most logical pick. Above that, if you look at the 8-9 game, Oregon was a tough pick for me. Maybe the toughest out of this whole slate. They lose everyone. They lose their quarterback, Dylan Gabriel. They lose their top 2 pass catchers to the NFL, and their number 3 pass catcher to an injury, a season-ending injury. They lose a lot. Now, they bring in Mekhi Hughes, a running back from Tulane, who was amazing for the Green Wave last year, so that's a big ad. They have a couple really nice ads in the portal, but I'm not super high in Oregon this year. But when I look at the teams outside of this 12, you're looking at Tennessee, who I also don't love. You're looking at Texas A&M, Miami, Ole Miss is another one. So a lot of teams you could swap in with Oregon. I do like Oregon more than any one of those other individual teams. Now, if you give me the field, if you give me Miami and Texas A&M and Ole Miss and Tennessee, if you give me the field over Oregon, yeah, I'm taking that group. So don't feel great about Oregon, but I feel better about Oregon than any of those kind of borderline teams. So I've got Oregon, and Arizona State I ranked in my top 5 in my preseason top 25 poll, which you could see, or I guess just the rankings, because it's not really a poll, it's just me. But check that video out. I break it down. They've got a ton of returning talent back. Levitt, their quarterback, by the way, a Clemson fan growing up. I know, again, like Boise State, they lose Cam Skattebo, their star running back, and so a lot of people might be down on them, but they still bring back more starters and more production than everyone else in that conference. Why would you not pick them, right? So I think, to me, Arizona State's the easy pick in the Big 12. Then going down, Ohio State, Louisville. Ohio State, even though I have Penn State as better than them, or at least beating them and winning the championship, it doesn't mean I'm down on Ohio State. They have to replace a lot. Most notably, they have to replace their quarterback, their offensive coordinator, and their defensive coordinator. And it's traditionally been near impossible to win a national championship when you're replacing more than one of those in the same year. So I'm not high on them to win the national championship, but I respect what that program's become. And they sort of look like they might be, maybe not Alabama when Saban had them rolling, but of that ilk, where every year you should expect them to be a top 5, top 6, top 7, top 8 team. It's going to make the playoff, no worse than, kind of a top 9 seed, top 10 seed, whatever, and probably at least advance to the final 8, because they're just so talented. By the end of the year, they'll figure it out. And by the end of last year, they really figured it out, and they went on to run and win the national championship. Louisville may be the only team on here that's surprising or truly controversial. And I just kind of believe in them. I believe in Jeff Brom. And I know that's a bit of a stretch, but I'm looking for a second ACC team. I don't think the ACC and the Big 12 will be held to only one each. So if I'm looking through the rest of the Big 12, I'm looking through the rest of the ACC. Miami stands out. Duke stands out to me. Georgia Tech's schedule's a little too hard. SMU stands out. But for me, something about Louisville, something about Jeff Brom, Miller Moss, they had a big transfer portal class. They have a somewhat, I don't want to say a favorable schedule because it's tough, but they get Clemson in Louisville on a Friday night. That's winnable for them. That's a perfect situation for them. They do have Miami and SMU, but if they could win 2 out of those 3, I think they're a playoff lock, and I think that's very possible for them. Maybe they beat Clemson the first time, and let's say they lose to SMU, but then they lose to Clemson the second time. So they're kind of like SMU last year where they're 11-1, but then they lose the championship, but they don't drop all the way out. I could see a very similar fate for them. So I know that one's a bit of a reach, but I think Louisville can make it. And then Alabama, I have questions about their quarterback situation, but they're just really talented. It's hard to really count them out 2 years in a row. And Illinois, they also return a ton of talent, kind of like Arizona State. I could see them taking a step. Luke Altmaier, quarterback I like. He's very good. Seems really grounded in his faith. Seems like he's ready to have a big year, bring a lot of guys back. You trust that defense after they shut down South Carolina, Illinois Sellers. So I like Illinois as kind of my sleeper pick. All right, so those are my 12 teams in the playoff. Let's take a look at who I have advancing. All right. So here we go. I have one upset here, and that's Arizona State over Oregon. I know not the biggest upset, the 9-8, but as I think about it, I'm not super confident Oregon's going to make it. I feel better about Arizona State making it, which is probably very uncommon to say, but I really like this Arizona State team, and I have questions about Oregon. Yeah, if Oregon makes it this far, they've probably gelled pretty well. So maybe Oregon just has the sheer young talent that they could beat Arizona State. But kind of believe in Sam Leavitt. I kind of believe in Dillingham, the coach, and what they're doing, and think they could possibly pull an upset, especially if it was in Arizona. But it is in Oregon, so that's a tough pick. But it's a toss-up. I don't want to go all chalk. So if I'm picking an upset, and I don't have a whole lot in here. It's the only one I have in this first round. So I'll go with Arizona State. I think it's very possible. I'm high on them. I've got them in my top 5 in my ranking, so I should be consistent and show it here. Tough one, but I'm going to Arizona State over the Oregon Ducks, who lose so much. Notre Dame, I mentioned before that Boise State has lost their last 3 games against Power 4 opponents. I think they lose to Notre Dame to make it 4 in a row. I think they lose to Notre Dame again in the playoff after losing to them in the regular season, make it 5 losses to Power 4 opponents in a row while just dominating their conference. And that's sort of the story for them. Notre Dame has a great offensive line. Jeremiah Love's an elite running back. I like their coaching. They do lose Al Golden and bring in Chris Ash. That could be a downgraded defensive coordinator. Really liked Al Golden in that spot. But I still think they're better than Boise State. As much as I talked about how much I like Louisville, Ohio State, at this point they should have gelled some, and that talent is just incredible there. And then Alabama, Illinois. If Alabama's good enough to make the playoff, their quarterback situation can't be that bad. I can't pick Illinois to beat Alabama. It's too bold. I don't have it in me. I'm going to Alabama there. So a little chalky, but you got one upset there. And maybe with Louisville making the playoff and perhaps Illinois too, a little bit of intrigue and surprise there. As we go into this next round, Penn State versus Arizona State. I've got Penn State advancing. They're my number 1 overall seed. Having Arizona State this far is probably a little bit bold. I'm high on Penn State. Look, I know people are down on their quarterback from some big game performances, but I'm not. Trevor Lawrence had a terrible game in that 2019 national championship game. Clemson really could have won that game if he was on point. I don't think we should be down on his legacy, Trevor Lawrence, and I don't think 1 or 2 bad games in big moments necessarily makes you unclutch. You're going to often play worse against great defenses. So it doesn't necessarily make you unclutch. That just makes defenses, good defenses harder. So not sliding Penn State here. I think they're really good. That's why I have them number 1 in my top 25, and I have them number 1 in this playoff, and I have them advancing into the Final Four. Georgia, Notre Dame. Questions at quarterback for each team. I think Notre Dame, if this is a game where it comes down to a battle in the trenches with the new quarterbacks, wide receiver groups that are not super elite, if this becomes defense and ground and pound, they did lose Al Golden, but I still think I trust that sort of Big Ten kind of style where it's defense and running. I'll take the team that has maybe the best running back in the country in Jeremiah Love and always turns out great offensive lines. While Georgia's offensive line, not elite last year. I mean, maybe they looked at against Clemson, but by the end of the year, not running the ball at an elite level, not like Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame might be better than Georgia right now. Georgia's showing kind of the post-championship regression that Clemson had. Will Georgia be fine? Yes. I'm not bashing Georgia, but I've got Notre Dame advancing here. Clemson, Ohio State is a tough one. Ohio State's really talented, but I like what Clemson's got at quarterback, a veteran fourth-year QB in Cade Klubnik. He's got the continuity at wide receiver, and something most teams can't do is Clemson has the talent to stack up head-to-head at receiver with Ohio State's elite receivers. Clemson's offensive line should be better and hold up against Ohio State's awesome defense. Jim Knowles is scary, but you know what? Tom Allen's pretty scary too. This could be a real battle. Clemson has beaten Ohio State before. It's a toss-up to me, but I'm going to go with a better seed. I'm going to go with the Clemson Tigers getting back to the Final Four, which to me is a successful season. You get into the Final Four, that's what I would consider like the true playoff when it was the right size. It wasn't this big bloated 12-team playoff. If Clemson gets back into the Final Four teams, this year is a success. So if my predictions at this point come true, it's been a great year. Then I have Texas versus Alabama. I said I thought Texas was the best of a muddled group towards the top half of the SEC, so I'm going to stick with that. I trust them at quarterback a little bit more, even though we haven't seen much of Arch Manning. We also haven't seen much of Ty Simpson or whoever is starting for Alabama. So who knows? And I trust Texas's defense more, which sounds backwards. Kalen DeBoer is a great offensive mind, and so is Steve Sarkisian. But Texas, I think on defense, is going to be the better team, and so I have them advancing. So now we look at Penn State versus Notre Dame. It's a rematch of last year, but I think now Penn State might be the team with more experience. Penn State might be the team that can win in the trenches. And while Jeremiah Love and that offensive line at Notre Dame is awesome, Singleton and Allen, you got 2,000-yard rushers and a veteran offensive line. Penn State might be even better in the trenches. So that's going to be another battle, sort of a Northeastern/Midwestern ground and pound kind of game. I think Penn State can pull it out this time. So they get their revenge, and I think for them, they're thinking that marks a successful season. And then Clemson, Texas, another rematch from a year ago, although not in the Final Four for that matchup. But Clemson went to Austin and gave Texas a scare, even though last year's Clemson team basically had no running back. They were trying Adam Randall there for the first time with 3 days of reps there. Now Adam Randall will have an entire season, an entire offseason to run the ball against Texas, and they've also got Gideon Davidson. They got David Iziomume. By this time, they'll have Jay Haynes back. So Clemson will be much better in the running game. Cade Klubnik will hopefully be building upon that great success he had against the Texas Longhorns. So I have Clemson beating the Texas Longhorns here and getting to the national championship. So there you have it. I've got Penn State versus the Clemson Tigers in the national championship. If you're watching this live, leave some comments, leave some questions before we wrap up, and I'll hit them. Don't forget, if you're not already, please subscribe to this channel. Really helps it out. If you're enjoying this video, click the like button, and I appreciate it. Shout out to our sponsor, Ready Vets. They're in the kind of Taylor's area of Greenville. If your dog or cat needs immediate help and you can't get into your family vet, go there. Dr. Capps is a Clemson graduate, a great doctor, and someone you could trust when you need help with your pet. So the national championship is Penn State versus Clemson. These teams haven't played since the 80s. Clemson won. Clemson's 1-0 all time against Penn State. This is, I think, a very even matchup. You got Drew Aller, a veteran quarterback. You got Cade Klubnik, a veteran quarterback. I lean a little bit towards Klubnik. I think he's a little bit more dynamic and maybe to some extent a little bit more trustworthy in big games. But I like them both. I think you lean a little bit Klubnik. Running backs, you certainly lean Penn State with their 2,000-yard rushers. Although, of course, if Clemson's made it this far, someone's emerged or a duo's emerged. Maybe Randall's become a great running back or Gideon Davidson's emerged. I still like David Iziomume. So Clemson should be fine there, but certainly advantage in the run game to Penn State. And then defense, look, I really like Tom Allen. I think that was an absolute steal. Dabo did what I've been begging. Go out, bring in outside minds and talent where you need them. Nothing against hiring appropriately Clemson guys like Ben Boulware. Love that. Bring the intensity to a very specific role. Love it. But when you need to bring in leadership, when you need to bring in new thoughts and new experiences, Tom Allen, amazing fit. So I'm pretty high on this defense taking a big leap, but a big leap might not even be big enough. They've got to take an absolutely huge leap. Last year, Clemson was 85th in rushing defense. They allowed 160 rushing yards per game. And you got to remember that includes playing teams like the Citadel, who ran all over them. NC State, App State, teams that aren't great. So against good teams like Texas, they got gashed. So how much does Tom Allen fix that? Does he get them from 85th to 50th? I think so. Does he get them to 30th? Yeah, maybe. Does he get them to like 25th? Maybe. Does he get them to like 5th or 4th or 3rd in rush defense? That might be a little unrealistic. And I think that not NC State, Penn State, if they can have this elite running back duo, this great offensive line, a quarterback that can make enough plays and is trustworthy, that's tough. If your rush defense against maybe the best rushing offense in the country is average, maybe they keep the ball out of the hands of Wesco and TJ Moore and Antonio. Like maybe they could play keep away and grind it and play that Midwest sort of Big Ten style. I think it's tough. I think this is another toss-up. I have Clemson beating Ohio State, which is kind of a toss-up, and beating Texas, which is kind of a toss-up. I don't have them winning this one, though. Penn State is my number one team in the playoff, the top 25, and I do have the Penn State Nittany Lions winning the national championship. So let me know what you think. Am I being negative on the Tigers? Am I being fair and taking off those orange tinted glasses and making a bold pick that's not always Clemson? I'm high on the Tigers. I think they could reach the Final Four, maybe in the championship game. Absolutely, they could win it. But for me, I have the Penn State Nittany Lions winning the national championship. Join in the comments. Let me know what you think. And of course, if you're not watching this live, stay tuned because we're about to hit the college football playoff draft. So enjoy.